That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, we've had a lot of requests over there on locals for us to go over to Keep Trade Cut, because I guess this is the most up-to-date Dynasty ADP that we're going to be able to find for me to look at some of the rankings there. So the consensus Dynasty community value, cross-reference that with my rankings, find some players that I am much higher on or a lot lower on compared to consensus, and dive into exactly why I think you should be lowering these, in particular, wide receivers down your rankings. But of course, before we get into it, go down there, drop that like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. And if you have not done so already, make sure you go over and get our Dynasty research book. Our Dynasty research book has over 100 pages of quality information on how to adjust for your league format, whether that's super flex, tight end premium, points per carry, tiered PPR, pretty much whatever you could imagine. Also, we have historical hit rates on rookies, what positions you should be targeting in what range of the draft. We have age cliffs. We have how to rebuild, how to turn your rebuilder into a contender. We have everything in that Dynasty research book. You can find that on flockfantasy.com, where it's available to purchase, or you can just get it by making a $10 deposit on Underdog Fantasy. I'm sure y'all have seen me have hundreds of live streams and drafts on Underdog Fantasy. Love the platform. Can't wait to draft with y'all throughout the entire offseason. And when you make your first deposit on Underdog Fantasy and you use promo code FLOCK, they'll match that first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. You will get our Dynasty research book, and you will get a month-long trial to our premium content over there on locals, all with just the $10 deposit. There's not a better offer you're ever going to find. So please take advantage of that. And let's go through, let's dive into this. And instead of me just giving the player's name outright, because I know when we say a player's name, you have strong emotions one way or another, I'm going to create an overall profile of this guy. Then I'll reveal it a little bit later on. We're going to do this with a couple of receivers here. So our first mystery receiver is going to be ranked as the wide receiver 27 on Keep Trade Cut. The wide receiver 27 on Keep Trade Cut. And I know people are going to maybe turn the video off when I say this, but I have him ranked in our Dynasty rankings as the wide receiver 45. Now, hear me out. The wide receivers that I have ranked higher than this player that is different than Keep Trade Cut would be Chris Olave, Keenan Allen, Darnell Mooney, Jameson Williams, Hollywood Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, Brandon Ayuk, Rashad Bateman, Chase Claypool, Mike Williams, Juju, Hunter Renfrow, Kadarius Toney, Michael Thomas. So that's a decent list to give you some context on the exact kind of value that this player holds. Most of y'all would prefer this wide receiver over those options, which I think is ludicrous. As we said, this is a 27-year-old wide receiver who last season played the entire year. He played the entire year, so we have a great sample to look at. And he played that year at 26 years old. And y'all know we referenced this in that Dynasty research book. Thomas, if you can throw that chart up here. I mean, we have clearly shown that after 26, that's when these wide receivers begin to slide. That's not to say, oh my God, you have to sell these guys right away. But 26 is the peak for wide receivers with their age production. Now, of course, that's not to say no wide receiver can improve after they turn 26. It's definitely possible. It's definitely in the range of outcomes. And as I've discussed, I'm not ranking this wide receiver as the wide receiver 61 in my Dynasty rankings. I have him as the wide receiver 45. So I am expecting him to take a step up. And I know that doesn't seem like a massive step up, wide receiver 61 to wide receiver 45. But in reality, I'm projecting a massive step up, because if anything, this receiver's statistics, I mean, throw you off a little bit if you just look at that wide receiver 61 mark, because he actually had a 7-game sample where the wide receiver 1 in his offense missed. So during that sample, he got the majority of his production last season in those 7 games. And if we look at this wide receiver, when the other top option played in his own offense, so when the wide receiver 1 played in this player's offense, instead of averaging the wide receiver 61 finish, he played 10 games, a very large sample. 10 games, he had 44.8 total fantasy points in a PPR format. That was 4.48 fantasy points per game when you had the wide receiver one, and it's a 10-game sample. That's a long sample. He's 26 years old. This is supposed to be the peak of his career. I think we can all get on board saying 26-year-old wide receiver, you're expecting them to peak. This player finished behind Marquise Goodwin, Keelan Cole, Freddie Swain, Jalen Reagor, Darius Slayton, Devin Duvernay, Lil Jordan Humphrey, shout out Texas, DeAndre Carter, Olamide Zaccheaus, and Laquan Treadwell. Yeah, that's very bad. And I know a lot of people are saying, okay, well, maybe this was an Allen Robinson type situation. Maybe this was a former elite level wide receiver that had a really down year. Then all of a sudden, I mean, we're just basing too much of our analysis off of that 2021 season. So let's take a step back. This guy's 27 years old. We should have a long track record of production to look at, and we should be able to figure out, why is the Dynasty community valuing him higher than someone like Chris Olave, someone like Keenan Allen? And if we go back to his best finish ever, it was in 2019, where he was the wide receiver 27 on a points per game basis. His best finish ever of his entire career, he was a high-end wide receiver 3. Now, I will admit, his situation has improved. 100%. His situation has improved, which is why I am projecting him to take a step forward. He has just gotten the best quarterback he has ever seen in his entire NFL career. I'm sure most people know this is Cortland Sutton by now. So with Sutton, yes, we should be expecting him to take a significant step forward with his efficiency, given the fact that Russell Wilson is finally going to be the deep ball quarterback. He's finally going to have some accuracy downfield. Now, what I personally don't understand is, how are we expecting Cortland Sutton to take a massive leap forward in his age 27 season to, I guess, outproduce Keenan Allen? Because if we're talking veteran players, he's going ahead of Keenan Allen, going ahead of DeAndre Hopkins. If you're a win-now team, give me those guys. If you are a rebuilding roster, give me the young options here. Give me Chris Olave. Give me Jameson Williams. And even some of these middling players, some guys that are pretty much identical with Cortland Sutton with their age. I mean, going over to players that are slightly younger than Sutton, but at a similar portion of their NFL careers. Mike Williams, Juju Smith-Schuster. These are wide receivers playing alongside Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes, and they have already posted seasons that Cortland Sutton can't come close to. We've never seen Sutton have this production. So I don't get it. I wouldn't be rostering Cortland Sutton on a rebuilding roster at this price. I wouldn't be rostering him on a contending roster at this price. And even if I was in the middle of the road, if I'm in the middle of the road, don't know where I want to go, I'm trading Cortland Sutton for Juju. I'm trading Cortland Sutton for Mike Williams. Trade him for Hollywood Brown. Hollywood Brown is 2 years younger at this point. And Hollywood Brown is a player that, with Lamar Jackson, was a top 12 wide receiver on a points per game last year. It's crazy. It's ludicrous. In my opinion, I will never be the Cortland Sutton guy. Y'all know I was saying he was being overdrafted last year. I was saying he was being overdrafted the year before that. I think it's because he looks like an alpha. He looks like that prototypical X wide receiver that people want to get excited about. He looks like Brandon Marshall. Yes, he looks great on the field. Yes, he made a Pro Bowl. I'm not playing fantasy football so I can turn on the TV and like the way my guy looks. I'm playing fantasy football so I can win. Even if this Denver Broncos offense goes out there and takes a massive step forward this next season, which it will with Russell Wilson. It will. Jerry Jeudy outproduced Sutton when they were both on the field by a wide margin last year. Jerry Jeudy was 22 years old last year. Will take a significant step forward. Jerry Jeudy is the alpha wide receiver in this offense. Jerry Jeudy is not close to Cortland Sutton. You have Tim Patrick. You have KJ Hamler on this offense as well. This is not Seattle. This is not going to be a team that funnels everything through 2 players and 2 players alone. This is the complete opposite end of the spectrum. They spread the ball. It's not like Russell Wilson. is a quarterback that says, you know what, I'm only throwing to 2 guys. No, Russell Wilson had to make that decision with Lockett and DK Metcalf, with Lockett and Doug Baldwin, because the personnel with the Seattle Seahawks, they didn't have capable depth wide receivers to spread out the target share. They do have that in Denver. I'm off of Sutton. I honestly don't know if I'll draft him in a single dynasty league this year. I don't know if I will have him in a single best ball format as well. If you want to hop into those underdog drafts with me on the live streams, I can guarantee you I'm not taking Cortland Sutton unless he falls significantly further than where he's currently going. Okay, so now let's go to our next player. This is also going to be someone that I know we threw a bunch of hate on last offseason when his value was a lot higher than this, very similar to Cortland Sutton. And I guess I'm going down the same path this year, because right now, if you're looking at keep trade cut, he's the wide receiver 17. If you're looking at my rankings, I have him anywhere from wide receiver 20 to wide receiver 24. I mean, really, it just, depending on the day, I go in there and move those rankings around every single day. Now, this is another 27-year-old wide receiver. So right in line with what we have from Cortland Sutton, where he is now on the decline with his dynasty value and dynasty value in particular. You know, if you read our dynasty research book, we broke down those age cliffs and those historical trends with age by production as well as dynasty value. And very rarely, it's damn near impossible for a player that's 27, 28, 29 years old at the wide receiver position to significantly increase in value. Those players drop like a rock with dynasty value. They can still be productive, but we're talking about assets almost strictly for a contending roster. So just to give you an idea of what this actually means with him going at wide receiver 17 and I have him at wide receiver 24 in our rankings. Some players that I have ranked above him that most of y'all don't: Drake London, Treylon Burks, Garrett Wilson, Hollywood Brown, Jerry Jeudy, and Elijah Moore. I know a lot of those are younger options, but a couple of those guys that have been in the league already, someone like Hollywood Brown, is already out producing this player. Now, if we go to the recent production that we have had, in 2021, he was the wide receiver 33 on a points per game basis. He had 61 receiving yards a game, 7.5 targets a game, and his touchdown rate was a little under 4%. I actually think this can come up. I am projecting, keep in mind, he just finished as the wide receiver 33. I have him ranked as the wide receiver 24 in our dynasty ranking. So I am projecting him to improve on what he had last year. And where that's going to come is that specifically most likely going to come with his touchdown rate. I think he can command the same amount of volume in this offense, but I think he will be luckier with the touchdowns that he scores because we saw it back his rookie season. Now, if we go back to his best finish ever, just like we did with Cortland Sutton, he was the wide receiver 21 back in 2020. And honestly, I just have to be completely transparent here. He could have been better than this because he averaged almost 9 targets a game. He had about 74.5 receiving yards a game. The issue is the touchdowns were just non-existent, but you know, I'm always the guy saying, okay, touchdowns, they're going to come if you continue to get this volume. Now, the issue is very similar to Cortland Sutton. He has had some of the worst quarterback play in the entire NFL over the past few seasons. And unlike Sutton, there has not necessarily been a massive correction with this. Now, yes, he does have a new quarterback, but at the end of the day, this quarterback does not necessarily look like he's going to be a massive, massive upgrade over what he's been dealing with over the past few years. And I guess it's probably obvious at this point. It's Terry McLaurin. With Terry McLaurin here, I just don't understand how he is going rounds ahead of someone like Hollywood Brown. I know Hollywood maybe is a little bit of a cheat code to mention based on his age, based on the production we've had over the past 2 seasons, but it's just striking the difference between these two players with their dynasty draft price, specifically because they were drafted in that same draft class. However, Hollywood Brown's significantly younger. And what I am specifically worried about with Terry McLaurin is the fact that Washington, if you look at a lot of mock drafts, it looks like they have the potential to take a wide receiver round 1, whether that's Drake London. I think it would make a lot more sense to put Garrett Wilson in that role, but it's possible for them to bring in competition for targets finally for Terry McLaurin. And we have never seen competition for targets with McLaurin in Washington before. McLaurin has been able to go out there and dominate very, very, very bad wide receivers. Like, let me pull up the actual stats that we have for Washington over the past few years, and you're going to see how laughable what they've been trotting out at the wide receiver position is. I mean, Leaders in receiving yards on this team this past season, beyond Terry McLaurin, the second player, J.D. Mckissick. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, Mason, don't you think that means they can just double McLaurin every single play and that hurts McLaurin? It does hurt his efficiency. It 100% does. And that's going back to what we were previously discussing with that touchdown rate. Terry McLaurin just simply has no shot to be able to go above the safeties, be able to take that ball deep because they're able to always shadow coverage over to Terry McLaurin. And if you were to add in a wide receiver like Garrett Wilson in the first round here, that would change. Terry McLaurin would 100% be able to have more splash plays, and his efficiency, his yards per target, his touchdown rate would most likely come up. But the difference is he would have a pretty big fall with his target share. As of now, he is just straight up dominating targets in Washington. 130 targets last season compared to the second best player, which is Adam Humphries at 62. If you were to have someone like Garrett Wilson, an elite wide receiver prospect, go there in the first round, all of a sudden that target share from McLaurin comes down from like 26, 27% to probably closer to like 22, 23%, which it's going to offset any gain in efficiency that you may have from McLaurin. And my issue specifically is I need to see consistency. I need to see consistency from the Dynasty community overall. Because if we're looking at McLaurin, if we're expecting him to have this massive jump up with production, if we're expecting that, based on the Carson Wentz acquisition, are we establishing a baseline that Carson Wentz is a decent NFL quarterback? I don't necessarily think that's the case. I don't see that big of a gap between Carson Wentz and Heineke. Definitely Carson Wentz, probably the best quarterback McLaurin's ever played with, but how much better is he actually? Now, why I want to bring this up is because I want to go to Carson Wentz's former team, and I want to look at Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman's someone that I went from being average to maybe slightly below average on compared to keep trade cut. But since you had Matt Ryan switch out with Carson Wentz, everybody's all in on Michael Pittman. It's the it thing. If you're not a fan of Michael Pittman at this point, you are a loser. You are to be mocked. People hate you. And what I'm looking at is I'm looking at these two contradicting things. How is Matt Ryan supposedly this large an upgrade over Carson Wentz that all of a sudden we should be ecstatic about Michael Pittman? And at the same time, how should we be raising up our expectations with McLaurin based on the addition of Carson Wentz as well? These two things don't add up, in my opinion. If I'm looking at Michael Pittman, I currently have him ranked around wide receiver 28, 27, all the way down to 29. It depends the day you're catching these rankings, but his keep trade cut is at 20. And my issue with this is, for the love of God, if we look at what you had with Michael Pittman as a prospect, Pittman was not a good prospect by any stretch of the imagination. Michael Pittman, his last year at USC, as a senior, allowed Drake London to get on the field as a freshman and Drake London to take a considerable amount of that volume away from him. Not only that, Amon-Ra St. Brown was there as well. Pittman was a senior. Pittman is going to be 25 years old this upcoming season. The best year we've ever had from Michael Pittman, wide receiver 28 on a per game basis. And he had absolutely no target competition whatsoever in Indianapolis, which will be the case going forward. Indy, I mean, they're not going to have anybody. The second leading receiver on this team with receptions was Zach Pascal. Now, so that allows Michael Pittman to go out there and dominate. If you're looking at his target share, of course, Michael Pittman looks great. He's competing against Zach Pascal. Now, with that being the case, he's the wide receiver 28, and he is currently going ahead in dynasty drafts. Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks, Drake London, all of which, it's laughable how much better those wide receivers are as prospects, how they grade out in our model compared to how Michael Pittman did. Michael Pittman has not blown away anybody through the first 2 years of his NFL career. Not at all. I mean, I would prefer Amon-Ra St. Brown over Michael Pittman. Amon-Ra St. Brown at the end of last year was significantly better. He was a rookie. He has room to improve with his quarterback situation. Well, like if we're looking at Matt Ryan, I don't get why everybody's this excited about Ryan. He's going to be 37 this upcoming season. Last year he was 19th in the NFL with his adjusted yards per pass attempt. Now, of course, that number is going to come up. He has a great offensive line. Offensive line has gotten slightly worse, but still a good offensive line, a great running game, one of the best running games in the NFL. His adjusted yards per pass attempt will come up. Carson Wentz was 13th last year because a lot of it has to do with the situation. I will say Matt Ryan's going to be a slight improvement over Carson Wentz, but for everybody in the Dynasty community to all of a sudden be all in on Matt Ryan as if Matt Ryan has just been set up to fail in Atlanta over the past few seasons and Matt Ryan's just going to be leading this division this upcoming, I don't get it. I don't see it. We need to be consistent. I don't think we can be dramatically moving Terry McLaurin up rankings because of the addition of Carson Wentz. I don't think we can be dramatically moving Michael Pittman up rankings because Carson Wentz is gone and Matt Ryan comes in. It's not like Matt Ryan is Russell Wilson. Now, please go to the comment section. Let me know how stupid I am. Let me know what I got wrong in this video. Let me know if you do prefer Michael Pittman over Drake London, if you prefer him over Garrett Wilson. Let me know if you prefer, oh my gosh, Terry McLaurin over Drake London, over those rookies as well, over Jerry Jeudy. Let me know if you prefer Cortland Sutton over Chris Olave, over Keenan Allen. Let me know what I'm missing. Of course, thank you so much for being a part of the flock, supporting the channel. Hope you have a great day. Go get our Dynasty research book. And yeah, see you with the video tomorrow.